It started with a sound, soft, hesitant, like someone tapping a pencil against a wall. In a city where rain never stopped whispering, that sound became her heartbeat. Every night at the same time, through the paper-thin wall of her new apartment in Seattle, she heard him, a rhythm, a melody, a fragment of something broken trying to remember what it once was. She didn't know his name, only that he played when the city fell asleep and stopped whenever she cried. Before we begin, if this story finds a place in you, if you still believe that love can come back even after everything, hit like, subscribe, and comment the city and state you're watching from. That's how I know where these stories are finding their way. The apartment smelled of paint and rain. Emily had just moved in after signing the divorce papers she never thought she'd have to sign. She had packed the life she'd built in Portland into 5 boxes, left the wedding ring in the kitchen drawer, and driven north until the skyline of Seattle rose like a promise of anonymity. She wanted silence, but silence was heavier than she expected. And then, on her 3rd night there, the music began. A hesitant acoustic guitar, just on the other side of her living room wall. At first, she thought it was coincidence. Then she realized he was playing the same song she had been humming while unpacking her books. Every night it changed. Soft jazz, old country, sometimes a haunting melody she couldn't name. It became their language, the only one she could bear. Through that wall, she started to feel less alone, like 2 ghosts trapped in neighboring rooms trying to remember what being alive sounded like. One evening, after another long day pretending she was fine at work, she finally tapped back. Just one nervous knock against the plaster. The music stopped. Then, 3 slow knocks in reply. Her breath caught. He had heard her, and for the first time in months she smiled. The next night, she left a note under his door. No name, just a line. "Who are you?" He didn't answer with words. The wall answered instead. A melody, soft and certain. It was her song. Emily couldn't sleep that night. The rain painted silver lines across her window, and the city outside looked like a movie paused between heartbeats. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, waiting. And when the first chords came through, slow, familiar, full of longing, she closed her eyes and let herself breathe again. It wasn't just music anymore. It was connection. It was the sound of someone else refusing to give up on the night. She didn't know who he was. She only knew his rhythm matched her pulse. When she watered her plants in the morning, she could hear him leaving. His footsteps, the faint jingle of keys, the sigh of the door closing. And at night, when loneliness grew heavy, she knew exactly when to listen. The wall had become her confession booth, her chapel, her proof that someone else out there was also trying to heal. Every note carried weight. She imagined his hands, his face, his story. Maybe he was older, maybe younger, maybe just as broken. Maybe he was the kind of person who stayed up at night rewriting his mistakes in the air. Emily started writing him letters she never meant to send, folded thoughts she kept under her pillow. "Do you play because you miss someone too?" she wrote one night. "Or because you can't forget?" Then one morning, on her way out, she found something taped to her door. A single sheet of paper, handwritten in messy ink. It read, "I play because I don't know how to talk." Her chest tightened. She stood in the hallway for a long time, rain dripping from her umbrella, before she smiled and whispered, "Then maybe I'll learn your language." That night, she placed her palm against the wall and whispered softly, "Play it again." And from the other side, the music answered, fragile, human, and heartbreakingly alive. The first time Emily saw him, she almost didn't realize it was him, the musician behind the wall, the man who had unknowingly kept her company for weeks. It happened on a grey Sunday morning when the building's fire alarm went off. Loud, shrill, relentless. She rushed out into the hallway barefoot, heart racing, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. He was there, standing by the stairwell, holding a cup of coffee and looking just as startled as she was. He had dark hair falling into his eyes and a day's worth of stubble. His t-shirt was paint-stained, his jeans ripped at the knees. He looked like someone who belonged to the night, someone who'd never learned to start mornings quietly. For a moment, they just stared. Then he smiled, small and uncertain, like a man caught in the middle of his own secret. "False alarm," he said, voice rough with sleep. "It happens every month." Emily nodded, still breathless. Guess I'm the only one who took it seriously. He tilted his head, studying her. You're the new neighbor, right? Apartment 4B. She hesitated. Yes. He offered a hand. I'm Jonah, 4A. The name lingered in the air between them like a note that refused to fade. She shook his hand and felt the faint calluses on his fingertips, proof of every song she'd ever heard through that wall. From that day on, things changed. The wall wasn't just a wall anymore. It was an invitation. At night, when she heard him play, she could picture him now, the curve of his jaw, the way he frowned slightly as he searched for the next chord. The music felt different too, lighter some nights, heavier others, always alive. Jonah, as it turned out, was a session guitarist who worked at a recording studio downtown. He didn't talk much about his past, and she didn't ask, but sometimes their paths crossed, in the elevator, at the mailboxes, in the hallway lined with old wallpaper that smelled faintly of rain and dust. Each time, the conversation lasted a little longer. One evening, she found a small envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a CD, handwritten in black marker. Track 4, For You. She played it on her old stereo and froze when she heard her own humming layered under his guitar. The same tune she'd sung that first week while unpacking. He had recorded her voice through the wall, not to invade, but to capture something real, something shared. She cried, not because she was sad, but because it had been so long since anyone had listened. The next day, she knocked on his door for the first time. He opened it halfway, surprised, holding a guitar pick between his fingers. I heard it, she said softly. The song. He nodded. You didn't mind? I didn't expect to be part of something that beautiful. He smiled, the kind of smile that lives in the eyes more than the lips. Then maybe we should write the rest together. That was how it began. Every night after work, they'd sit on opposite sides of the wall, sending fragments of melodies back and forth. Sometimes he'd tap a rhythm, and she'd answer with a hum. Other times, she'd write lyrics on scraps of paper and slide them under his door. The wall became their studio, their confessional, their secret place where nothing hurt as much. But every secret, no matter how soft, begins to ask for more space. Weeks passed. Spring arrived in the way it always does in Seattle, quietly, without fanfare. The city smelled of wet earth and coffee. Emily started smiling again at strangers in cafes, her laughter returning in small, unexpected bursts. Jonah, meanwhile, began leaving his door open when he played, letting the notes drift freely through the hallway. One night, after a late shift at the design firm, she came home to find him sitting on the steps outside, tuning his guitar. He looked up. You okay? She shrugged, dropping her bag beside him. Rough day, clients. Music helps, he said. I know. They sat together, watching the rain fall under the yellow glow of the street lamp. He began to play, slow, easy, something bluesy that didn't need words. And when he looked at her, really looked, something unspoken passed between them. For the first time, she realized how dangerous hope could feel. Their closeness grew in quiet increments, shared coffees, late-night texts about random songs, a laugh that lingered too long in the air. But Jonah was always careful, always holding a piece of himself back. Then one night, she heard shouting through the wall, his voice, angry, broken, and another voice over the phone. The argument ended with the crash of something falling. The music stopped for 3 days. By the fourth night, Emily couldn't stand it anymore. She knocked on his door, no plan, just instinct. He opened it slowly, eyes red-rimmed, hair unkempt. Jonah, what happened? She asked. He hesitated. Then, it's my brother. He died last year. I was supposed to be there. I wasn't. The words hit like rain on glass, soft but shattering. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached out and held his hand. He let her. For the first time, the wall between them was gone. That night, she stayed, not as a lover, as someone who understood what silence costs. From that day forward, the music changed again, deeper, raw, sometimes painful. He began recording new tracks, using her voice as harmony. The song that had once been about loneliness became something else, a conversation between two people learning how to start over. Emily began to believe that maybe this was what healing sounded like. But love, real love, always comes with risk. One morning, her ex-husband showed up at her office, holding a folder full of old divorce papers he'd never signed. "We can still fix this," he said. "Come back." That night, she sat by the wall, listening to Jonah play. The melody faltered halfway through, like he could sense the storm inside her. She pressed her hand to the wall, whispering, "I don't know what to do." And from the other side came his voice, quiet, trembling, real. "Then don't say anything yet. Just stay." Days turned into weeks again. The apartment building hummed with life, laughter, footsteps, the smell of coffee drifting through cracked doors. But for Emily and Jonah, time stood still. The music became their way of breathing, of holding each other without touching. Then came the night of the blackout. A thunderstorm rolled over the city, cutting the power across half the block. The hallways fell into darkness, the only light coming from flickering candles. Emily sat by her wall, waiting, but the guitar never came. She stood, grabbed her candle, and stepped into the hallway. Jonah's door was open, the room dimly lit. He sat by the window, guitar in his lap, staring at the rain. "You're supposed to play," she said softly. He turned. "Not tonight. I just wanted to hear your voice instead." She laughed nervously. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," he murmured. "Just be here." She crossed the room and sat beside him. For the first time, no wall separated them, just silence and the storm outside. When the lights finally came back on, they didn't move. The world felt reset somehow. He reached for her hand, tentative, like testing the strings of a new song. She didn't pull away. Outside, thunder rolled into distance. Inside, everything changed. He looked at her and said, "You ever think about what happens when the song ends?" She smiled sadly. "Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just finds another melody." He leaned forward, kissed her forehead, gentle, unfinished, then whispered, "Then play it with me." And for the first time, she said yes. The next morning, sunlight spilled through her window, soft and gold. The wall that once divided them was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. It felt full of everything they hadn't said, but somehow understood. In that silence, Emily realized the truth. Sometimes love doesn't arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes softly, through walls, through music, through the steady rhythm of two hearts learning how to listen again. The morning after, the world smelled like rain and coffee. Emily woke up with the faint echo of his guitar still inside her chest, like the city itself had learned their song overnight. The space between their apartments no longer felt like distance. It felt like gravity. She made breakfast, burnt toast, 2 cups of coffee, one left outside his door with a sticky note, "For the man who plays the rain." When she returned from work that evening, the cup was gone, and in its place was a folded napkin with a line written in blue ink, "For the woman who listens." It wasn't a love story yet, not the kind that survives storms. It was softer, smaller, 2 people rebuilding faith in moments. They started spending mornings on the fire escape, passing coffee through the railing, watching the city breathe below. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't, and in the silence, it was enough. But every beginning carries a shadow, and theirs was coming. Jonah had a way of disappearing, not all at once, just piece by piece. Missed calls, half-finished texts, nights when his music never came. When she finally asked, he just smiled like someone who didn't want to ruin something good with the truth. One afternoon, she dropped by the recording studio where he worked. The receptionist pointed her to a sound booth. Through the glass, she saw him, headphones on, guitar in hand, next to a woman she didn't know. They were laughing, leaning close, their hands brushing over the same sheet of music. The sound in her chest turned hollow. When he stepped out and saw her, surprise flickered in his eyes. "Hey," he said, pulling off the headphones. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "I didn't think I had to," she replied quietly. He looked at the floor. "She's just the vocalist, nothing more." Emily nodded, but the melody of doubt was already playing in her mind. That night, when he knocked on her door, she didn't answer, and for the first time since she'd moved in, the wall stayed silent. The days that followed felt heavier. She tried to drown her thoughts in work, long walks, and playlists that never sounded right. Yet every corner of the apartment reminded her of him. The dent on the wall where he'd leaned his guitar, the smell of his coffee lingering in the air, the echo of laughter that still lived between their doors. Jonah tried again. Notes under her door, small gestures, a single sunflower in a jar left outside her window. She ignored them all, not out of anger, but fear. Because what if it wasn't enough? Then one night, the music came back. Not soft, not hesitant, desperate. A storm of chords crashing against her walls. Every note an apology he didn't know how to speak. She sat on the floor, listening, tears tracing salt across her skin. When the song ended, she opened her door. He was standing there, guitar in hand, soaked from the rain. "I messed up," he said simply. "Not with her, with everything else. I keep running from what I actually want because I don't think I deserve it." She looked at him for a long moment, the city humming behind them. "And what do you want?" "You," he whispered. "Even if it scares me." They didn't fall in love that night. They chose it, slowly, carefully. The kind of love that doesn't happen all at once but grows like ivy, persistent, unstoppable. They started writing together again. Jonah brought melodies, Emily brought words. Their song became a reflection of everything they couldn't say directly. Her fear of being abandoned, his guilt over surviving the ones he'd lost. Every lyric was a confession disguised as poetry. In those moments, their world was perfect. But perfection is fragile. And love, no matter how beautiful, always asks for honesty. One night, as they mixed a new track, his phone lit up with a message. Just a name, a woman's, the same one from the studio. He silenced it quickly, but she saw. "Who is she really?" Emily asked. He hesitated, and that pause said more than words ever could. The argument was quiet at first. Two people trying to protect something delicate while it cracked in their hands. "She's my ex," Jonah finally said. "She came back to record, that's all. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think less of me." Emily laughed softly, a sound more painful than shouting. "Then maybe you should have trusted me enough to know the difference." He stepped closer. "I do trust you. Then why does it feel like you're still on the other side of the wall?" He had no answer. That night, she went back to her apartment and closed the door. The silence was unbearable. She turned on the stereo and played their song, the one they'd written together, and for the first time, it hurt to hear it. Jonah left the next morning for a week-long recording trip to Los Angeles. He texted her once, "I'll come back better." She didn't reply. The week felt endless. Rain returned, flooding the city in shades of grey. She tried to write but couldn't. Her notebook stayed blank, except for one line. He said the music would fix everything. Maybe it only hides what's broken. Then, one evening, there was a knock at her door. Not Jonah, his friend from the studio. He handed her an envelope. "He wanted you to have this." Inside was a flash drive labeled, "For Emily." Her hands trembled as she plugged it in. A single track played, raw, unfinished, his voice cracking halfway through the lyrics. "If I could learn to speak without fear, I'd tell her the truth." I never stopped playing for her. By the time he returned, she was waiting outside his door. He froze when he saw her. "I heard it," she said. He nodded slowly. "Then you know." She took a deep breath. "I do, but I need to know one more thing. Are you going to keep hiding behind the music, or are you finally ready to live it?" He dropped the guitar case at his feet. "If you'll still let me try, I'm ready." She smiled faintly. "Then start now." He stepped forward, rain dripping from his hair, and kissed her. Not perfectly, not like in movies, but real, trembling, human. And when they broke apart, she whispered, "Welcome to the other side of the wall." That night, their apartments felt like one space, two hearts finally in rhythm. The next morning, Jonah sent her a text before dawn. "Meet me on the roof." She climbed the narrow stairwell barefoot, wind tugging at her hair. He stood there, sunrise spilling over the city. A small speaker played softly between them. Their song, finished at last. He looked at her and said, "I used to think music was the only way to speak without being hurt, but now, I just want to talk to you." She reached for his hand. "Then say it." He smiled. "I love you." The city woke around them. Traffic, gulls, the scent of rain lifting. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of it all blend into something whole. For the first time, silence didn't scare her, because even when no music played, she could still hear him. And in that quiet morning light, Emily realized love had never really lived on the other side of the wall. It had always been there, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. The week after their rooftop sunrise felt like a song still finding its chorus. Jonah and Emily settled into a rhythm that was imperfect but alive. He'd play softly in the mornings while she got ready for work, and she'd hum under her breath while making coffee, both pretending not to notice how naturally they'd started to share a life that neither of them had planned. Seattle stretched endlessly grey outside, but inside those walls, everything felt lighter. Jonah moved some of his instruments into her apartment, not officially, not as a declaration, but because it just made sense. Less walking between walls, he'd said. He left his guitar leaning against her couch, his hoodie on her chair, and one night, his toothbrush beside hers. There was no conversation about it, just a quiet understanding that this was where he wanted to be. They spent nights on her couch, watching movies they never finished, half talking about dreams they hadn't told anyone before. Emily spoke about her fear of failing, how the divorce had made her doubt every decision since. Jonah told her how guilt had kept him from making music for almost a year, how every new song felt like a betrayal of the brother he lost. The confessions came slowly, one layer at a time, until the silence between them became as intimate as touch. But even the most fragile happiness has gravity, something that pulls it toward truth. One night, Jonah got a call from the studio. A record label in Los Angeles had heard his latest track, their track, and wanted to meet him. It was the kind of chance every musician dreams about. Emily watched him hang up, his hand trembling slightly, eyes full of something between joy and fear. "You have to go," she said immediately. "I don't know," he replied. "It's big, it's far, and I don't want to lose what we've built here." She smiled, though her chest ached. "You won't. Just promise me you'll come back." He nodded, but his eyes betrayed the doubt neither of them wanted to name. That night, he held her longer than usual, and when morning came, his side of the bed was already cold. Jonah's trip was supposed to last a week. It stretched into 3. Texts turned shorter, then fewer. Calls went unanswered. Emily told herself he was busy, that dreams took time, that distance didn't always mean disinterest. But the silence felt too familiar. It was the same kind that had ended her marriage, the same that filled rooms where love once lived. She tried to stay busy. Work, yoga, long walks through Pike Place Market. But everywhere she went, she heard traces of him. Street musicians strumming familiar chords, the hum of elevators that matched his old rhythm. Seattle had become one long reminder. Then, one night, her phone buzzed. A photo from Jonah. Him in a studio, surrounded by lights, a crowd of new faces. He looked happy. She typed, "I'm proud of you," then deleted it before sending. Days later, the news broke online. A local Seattle artist, Jonah Hale, had signed a deal with a major label in Los Angeles. Interviews, posts, applause. His music, their song, everywhere. Emily sat on the floor, scrolling through clips of him performing live. He looked like a stranger wearing his own skin, confident, radiant, unreachable. And yet, when he played that song, she could see it, the flicker of memory in his eyes, the shadow of the wall that once separated them. She turned off her phone, walked to the wall between their apartments, and pressed her hand against the cold plaster. "You made it," she whispered, but the words tasted like goodbye. Jonah came back to Seattle 2 months later. She didn't know until the night he knocked on her door again. He looked exhausted, like success had come at a price no one warned him about. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I didn't mean to disappear." Emily crossed her arms. "But you did. I thought I was doing it for us," he said. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot what us even meant." She stared at him, trying to find the man who'd once played for her through the wall. "You didn't forget," she said quietly. "You just stopped listening." He stepped closer, desperate. "Then let me listen now." She shook her head. "You can't just come back and pick up where we left off, Jonah. I'm not the same woman waiting on the other side anymore." And before he could speak again, she closed the door. Weeks passed. He tried calling. She ignored him. He sent letters, gifts, even tickets to his first show back in Seattle. She left them unopened. Love, she realized, isn't always enough to bridge the distance created by ambition and fear. Then, one night she woke to music. The wall, that old familiar wall, was alive again. He was playing their song. She sat up, heart racing, tears already burning. But this time, the melody was different. Raw, slower, full of apology. Every note a plea. Emily walked to the wall, her hand trembling. Then, for the first time in months, she tapped back. Jonah stopped playing mid-chord. Silence. Then the sound of footsteps. A moment later, a knock on her door. When she opened it, he stood there, rain-soaked, shaking, the same way he'd been the night he first told her the truth. "I can't play without you," he said simply. She didn't reply. He took a step closer. "I tried to make music out there, Emily, but every time I picked up the guitar, all I heard was you. Not your voice, not even your words, just the quiet way you made the world feel possible again." Her throat tightened. "Jonah, I don't need the label. I don't need the city. I just need to know if you still believe we can finish what we started." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain hit the window in steady rhythm, the same rhythm that had once brought them together. Then she said softly, "Play." He smiled, small, fragile, real. And there, in her living room, he began to play. No stage, no lights, no audience, just them. When the song ended, she stepped forward, pressing her forehead to his. "If you leave again," she whispered, "don't expect me to wait." He nodded. "I won't. I'll stay." And for the first time, she believed him. The months that followed weren't perfect. They fought, they made up, they learned. Jonah started teaching music classes locally, refusing big tours. Emily left her job and began illustrating album covers for independent artists. They built something small but steady, a life measured in coffee cups, quiet mornings, and the gentle hum of a shared apartment. The wall between them remained, but now it carried warmth instead of echo. Sometimes he'd play, and she'd draw beside him. Other nights, they'd just sit in silence, knowing silence was no longer a threat. One evening, long after the city had fallen asleep, Emily asked, "Do you ever miss it? The stage, the crowds, the noise?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But mostly, I think I was chasing applause because I didn't know how to hear peace." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And now, he said, brushing her hair aside, "I hear you." Years later, when their song played on local radio for the first time, Emily didn't cry. She just listened, eyes closed, as the melody filled the room. It wasn't the same recording. Jonah had re-recorded it quietly in their living room, using the sound of rain outside the window as background. The host's voice announced, written by Seattle artists Jonah Hale and Emily Carter, "The apartment across the hall." Emily laughed softly, shaking her head. He looked at her from the couch. "You okay?" She nodded. "I think we finally finished it." He smiled. "No, we just stopped being afraid to keep playing." The night ended the way it began, with music through the walls. Except this time, the wall wasn't a barrier. It was a memory. As the rain whispered outside, Emily traced her fingers across the plaster, remembering everything that had lived within it: loneliness, hope, forgiveness, love. And somewhere between the echo of chords and the heartbeat of the city, she realized that some songs never really end. They just become the sound of home. Autumn came softly that year, wrapping the city in amber light and cold mornings that smelled of rain and roasted coffee. The air carried a kind of quiet only Seattle knew, a hush that made every streetlight and every puddle look like part of a painting. For Emily and Jonah, the season felt like breathing again after too long underwater. Their small apartment had become a refuge, full of half-finished songs, coffee stains, and the soft murmur of two lives finally learning to fit together. Emily's art had begun to take shape in ways she hadn't expected. One of her designs, the cover she drew for Jonah's latest track, had gone viral online. Requests started coming in from other artists, each one bringing her closer to something that felt like purpose. Jonah, meanwhile, spent his days teaching music to teenagers at a community center downtown. He said it helped him remember why he'd started playing in the first place. Their life was not grand, but it was real. Morning sunlight spilling over unmade beds, laughter over burnt pancakes, Long nights of silence that didn't need to be filled. But sometimes, even the happiest chapters carry small cracks that no one wants to see. It began with Jonah's cough, just a small one at first, the kind people blame on weather, dust, too much late-night singing. Emily told him to rest. He brushed it off with a grin. "You worry too much." Weeks passed. The cough stayed. Then one morning, as he tried to tune his guitar, his hands trembled so badly he dropped the pick. He laughed it off again, but Emily didn't. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the way his eyes had dulled under the soft lamplight. "Promise me you'll see a doctor," she said. He kissed her forehead. "I promise," but he didn't. The truth came 2 months later, in the form of a doctor's call she wasn't meant to hear. Jonah had collapsed at the community center, and by the time Emily reached the hospital, the hallway smelled like antiseptic and fear. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, pale but still trying to smile. "It's nothing," he said. "Just pneumonia." She knew it wasn't. The tests came back. A lung condition, early stage, but chronic. Manageable, they said, but irreversible. The music, the nights in smoky bars, the endless hours in damp studios, it had all taken a toll. Emily sat beside him, unable to speak. He finally whispered, "You don't have to stay." She turned to him sharply. "Don't you dare say that." "I mean it," he said softly. "You've rebuilt everything once before. You don't need to do it again for me." She took his hand and held it tight. "Then let's rebuild it together." Recovery was slow. Weeks of medication, oxygen therapy, doctor visits. Jonah hated feeling weak, hated the way she looked at him with worry instead of admiration. He tried to keep teaching, but fatigue followed him like a shadow. One night, Emily found him sitting on the fire escape, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the city lights. His guitar leaned beside him, untouched. "Play something," she said gently. He shook his head. "Not tonight. It hurts." "Your lungs?" "My heart," he said, half smiling. "Every song I ever wrote was about wanting more time. Now I finally understand what that means." She sat beside him, cold air biting their cheeks. "Then let's use the time we have." He looked at her, eyes wet with exhaustion and something deeper. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," she said, "but love never was." Winter arrived early, coating the city in frost and silver breath. Emily took over the bills, cooked, drew, and tried not to show how afraid she was. Jonah, stubborn as ever, recorded a new set of demos, his most vulnerable yet. Every track was slower, quieter, stripped of everything except truth. He titled the collection, "Walls We Broke." When he played it for her, she cried. Not because it was sad, but because it was alive. It was the sound of someone refusing to vanish. "Promise me you'll finish it," he said one night. "Even if I can't." She shook her head. "We'll finish it together." But deep down, she feared promises were just another kind of prayer. In February, the condition worsened. He spent more days in bed, coughing fits, stealing his voice. Emily worked beside him, sketching while he slept, drawing the sound of the songs he could no longer play. The walls of the apartment became her canvas. Lyrics in pencil, unfinished melodies scribbled on sticky notes, love preserved in fragments. Then one morning, she woke to silence, the kind that pressed too hard on the chest. Jonah wasn't in bed. The window was open, and the sound of distant waves drifted in. She ran to the roof. He was there, sitting by the edge, bundled in his jacket, guitar in his lap. "You shouldn't be up here," she said, breathless. He smiled weakly. "You remember what I told you once, about the song never ending?" She nodded, tears already falling. "I think I finally hear how it finishes." She knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around him, her voice breaking. "Then let me be part of it." He closed his eyes, leaned against her shoulder and whispered, "You already are." He didn't die that night. Love wouldn't let him. But the hospital stay that followed changed everything. Jonah's lungs couldn't handle the cold anymore. Music had to stop, at least for a while. Emily brought his guitar home, placed it gently against the wall, and sat staring at it for hours. The apartment felt both too full and too empty. But when she closed her eyes, she could still hear him, the way he used to play, the rhythm of his breathing, the sound that had once crossed plaster to find her. She picked up the guitar. Her fingers fumbled, clumsy and unsure, but she kept playing until the sound became something real, until it felt like him. When Jonah came home weeks later, frail but smiling, he stopped in the doorway and listened. "That's my song," he said. "No," she replied, her voice trembling. "It's ours." He laughed softly. "Guess the wall finally taught you something." She smiled through tears. "Yeah, it taught me how to keep listening." By spring, Jonah was recovering slowly. He could walk without gasping, climb stairs without fear. Emily turned his unfinished demos into a short album, a quiet tribute titled The Apartment Across the Hall. When it released online, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages poured in from people who said the music reminded them of someone they loved and lost. Jonah read every message, his eyes shining. "Maybe that's what it was always meant to be," he said. "Not just ours." Emily nodded. "But it started with us." He reached for her hand. "Then let's keep starting." On their anniversary, 1 year since the morning she left coffee by his door, Jonah surprised her. He had rebuilt the wall between their apartments, repainting it white and smooth. On it, he had written the lyrics to their first song in careful handwriting. Above it, a single line, "Every heartbeat has its echo." She traced the words, tears blurring her vision. "You really can't stop building walls, can you?" He smiled. "Only the ones worth breaking again." That night, as the rain returned and the city glowed beneath it, Emily lay beside Jonah and listened to his breathing. Uneven but steady, fragile but alive. Life, she realized, isn't about how loud the music is. It's about who hears it with you. And as the soft hum of rain became their lullaby, she whispered, "Play it again." Jonah's lips curved into a smile, eyes half closed. Always. The guitar, resting beside the bed, caught the reflection of the city lights. Quiet, waiting, eternal. And somewhere beyond the walls, Seattle listened too. Years passed quietly, the way seasons do when you stop counting them. The apartment changed little. Same wooden floors, same rain-streaked windows, same smell of paint and roasted coffee. But the people inside it had changed entirely. Emily's hair carried streaks of silver now, and Jonah's hands trembled more than before. Yet his touch was still steady when it mattered. The music hadn't stopped, it had simply softened. Their days fell into rhythm. Morning tea, a walk to the corner cafe, evenings spent listening to old vinyls while the city hummed outside. Emily had turned one room into a small studio where she painted album covers, sometimes for Jonah's students, sometimes just for herself. He taught fewer classes now, but his voice still carried warmth that could calm anyone within reach. The wall between their apartments remained, white and filled with memories. Every few months, Emily would repaint the lyrics when they began to fade, tracing each word carefully, as if rewriting a prayer. And every night before bed, Jonah would rest his hand against the plaster and whisper, "Still here." It wasn't passion the way it once was. It was something quieter, truer, the kind of love that lives in shared silence, in unfinished songs, in the comfort of knowing someone will always be waiting just a few steps away. On a morning heavy with fog, Emily woke to an unfamiliar stillness. The window was open, rain tapping against the sill. The guitar leaned against the wall, untouched. Jonah was sitting by the window, eyes closed, a small smile on his lips. For a moment she thought he'd fallen asleep mid-song. Then she saw the notebook in his lap, open to a page that read simply, "For Emily, always." The breath left her body before the tears came. She knelt beside him, her hand over his, still warm. Outside, the city carried on. Buses, footsteps, the hum of 1,000 strangers unaware that somewhere above them, one life had quietly turned into music. She didn't scream. She didn't break. She just sat there, listening to the sound of rain on glass, and whispered, "I hear you." The days that followed blurred together. Condolence calls, friends from the studio, the community center naming a new music room after Jonah. Seattle wept softly, the way it always does. But when night fell, Emily could almost hear him again, faint, like a song playing through walls. She picked up his guitar, strummed once, and smiled through tears. It sounded terrible, but she kept playing, humming the melody they'd written years ago, until the notes filled the room with something that felt like peace. That night, she began a new painting. Jonah sitting by the window, rain falling behind him, the city outside glowing in gold. Across the canvas, she wrote the words that had defined their love. Every heartbeat has its echo. Months later, the small studio they'd shared hosted a memorial concert. Jonah's students performed his songs, each one trembling but full of life. Emily stood in the back, hand over her heart, listening. When her turn came, she walked to the microphone, the guitar hanging awkwardly from her shoulder. "I'm not a musician," she said softly, "but I lived with one. And he taught me that love isn't about how perfectly you play. It's about who listens when you can't." She played the first chords, slow, fragile, the melody of The Apartment Across the Hall. And as her voice broke on the chorus, the entire room joined in, hundreds of voices carrying the song through tears. For a moment, she could swear she felt him there, behind her, beside her, maybe even inside every note. When the crowd dispersed, she stayed behind, walking back to the now empty apartment. The rain had started again, as if the city were keeping rhythm with her grief. She set the guitar down, turned off the lights, and sat by the wall, the same wall where it had all begun. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "We finished it." The silence that followed was soft, almost tender. And then, maybe imagination, maybe memory. A single sound. 3 faint knocks against the wall. Emily smiled. "Yeah," she whispered. "I hear you." Years later, the building was sold. A young couple moved into what had once been Jonah's apartment. They found faint pencil marks under a layer of paint, lines of lyrics, and the outline of a heart. Across the hall, an older woman still lived quietly, painting by her window, always humming something the couple couldn't quite recognize. Sometimes, late at night, they'd hear music, a guitar, soft and distant, playing through the walls. They asked her once jokingly if she could hear it too. Emily smiled, her eyes shimmering with something ancient and gentle. "Oh, I hear him every night," she said. "That's just how love sounds when it never really ends." And somewhere beyond the city, beyond the rain and the noise, the music continued, not loud, not sharp, just eternal. Because some songs don't fade, they echo. The rain never stopped in Seattle, but Emily learned to love its rhythm. Years after Jonah's last note faded into the night, the city still whispered his melody through every wet street and window pane. She kept the apartment exactly as it had been. Guitar by the wall, sketches along the shelf, the white plaster that once divided them smooth and quiet. Most nights, she would sit with a cup of tea, eyes half closed, listening. And even though no sound came, the silence carried his voice. Love, she realized, was never about the walls we build or the songs we write. It was about the courage to keep listening after the music stops. Every time she painted, every time she taught a student to trace emotion into line and color, she was still speaking his language, the one made of pauses, patience, and heartbeats. On the anniversary of their first song, she walked to the roof where everything began. The city glittered below, alive with noise and stories she'd never know. She opened Jonah's notebook, the one marked, "For Emily, always," and found a line she'd never seen before. "If you're reading this, the silence is yours now. Fill it with whatever keeps you breathing." She laughed softly, wiping a tear that tasted like rain. Then she whispered, "I will." And as the clouds rolled over the skyline, she closed her eyes and let the sound of the world become his final harmony. Buses, footsteps, seagulls, wind, life. The apartment, the music, the city, the love. All of it had been one long song, written in 2 hearts that refused to stop echoing. Because some loves don't end when the story does. They just learn to live in the quiet between notes.